Cool. Hey everybody, this is Tom Arbuthnot live from Microsoft Ignite. We're here in the final day. We've all made it to the final day.
Barely.
Yeah, just about. Josh is very struggling a little bit. We're live in the community area. There's still a bit of a buzz around here. Still a few things going on. Here with some of my friends and MVPs. Guys, do you want to introduce yourself? Starting with Pat.
Apps and Services MVP.
Josh.
Josh Blalock, also Office Apps and Services MVP. It doesn't roll off the tongue yet. We're still getting used to that rename.
Yeah, there's a lot of words, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ståle Hansen, also on Office Apps and Services MVP.
We're all going to trip on that.
Yeah. And Tom Arbuthnot, Principal Solutions Architect at Medallion Systems, and one of those MVPs as well. So this is a super informal podcast. We just wanted to kind of wrap up the show's news, really. And I thought we'd start with Skype Business Server. So, Ståle, why don't you start? What were your takeaways from the Skype Business Server news this week?
Yeah, so the main takeaway for Skype for Business Server 2019, which is coming out, is the way they integrate the on-premises calling and cloud. So you get the single pane of looking at call quality when you're troubleshooting and have all the users at the same place. I think that's the main piece for me.
Yeah, and that seems to be a theme, even though it's a server release. It's about like the best of both, isn't it? Like here's some cloud advantages you can take even though you have maybe business or technical requirements or even financial requirements to stay on premises for whatever reason. Yeah,
and we see more and more companies, they want to have some users maybe on premises, some users online, and some users even in Teams. So it's a good way to combine all that data. And now I saw it will integrate with Power BI even, the CQD dashboard.
Yeah.
So it's an easy way to create some nice reports, actually.
The CQD thing is going to be huge, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the ability to have a server install, but have your call quality data stream up to Microsoft's cloud.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in CQD as well. They're adding new reports. They're adding some personally identifiable data, so you can drill down a bit deeper.
Yep.
Yeah. What about you, Pat? What did you take away?
Well, I think, obviously, if you're in the Teams space here, this was a great event. Lots of sessions around it. A lot of stuff around Skype for Business Server 2019. The sessions were very well attended. I think a lot of people have a lot of interest in what the future holds for that platform. As Ståle said, some great things with integration with the cloud. You'll be able to click on a user and move them directly into Teams. You'll be able to do things like some CIFA util things with PowerShell now, something that
you had to mention the PowerShell,
right? That's right. But I mean, things that we've been asking for a long time are finally coming to fruition in this version. So, and then eventually the elimination of Silverlight from the control panel. I think a lot of people just did not like Silverlight, so the ability to use HTML5 is going to be a welcome change.
Cool.
Yeah, the call data connector obviously is a big deal. And that's something that they have been talking about for months now. Where we know Azure Voicemail is part of that, and there's several other components of bringing call analytics into the cloud from on-prem. Super exciting on that front. And there's other exciting features too, having to do with the admin center and a couple other things they showed yesterday, like CIFA util server. But for me, one of the big takeaways was kind of a similar takeaway to last year. And that was a reinstated commitment to on-premises server. They wanted to make sure that they got the message out, that they are still developing.
Yep.
They're not just throwing another server out there and saying, is it done yet? They're continuing to add features and CUs. There's a roadmap there. So the roadmap is being defined, but there is a roadmap there.
Yeah, and it's obvious from the sessions, like Microsoft's future vision is Teams for collaboration and for UC. Like if you look at the session weighting, it's all about Teams and there's a little bit about server. But yeah, it's nice to hear that be said. Like Microsoft there's a big on-premises install base. You guys aren't going to move overnight, and there's no force to move. Microsoft want to encourage you to move by new features, not force you to move. So it's nice that you have both options on the table.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. We were just talking off camera about both actually Skype for Business and Exchange, the server requirement changes. Did someone want to jump on that?
Well, it's higher.
Yeah, it's higher.
That's a good summary. It's a lot higher.
Yeah, it's a lot higher, both for Skype and Exchange.
Yeah.
And so what's the memory requirements now?
So Exchange, I think it's gone up to 128 gig of RAM for a server.
Skype is 64 gigs.
Yeah, which makes Skype sound good comparatively.
Right.
It's interesting because we're not seeing any radical functional difference. So it's interesting to see those numbers going up, and it looks like Microsoft just saying, this is what a server has these days. So that's what we're going to test against.
I think the fact that we now have to send a lot of data to the cloud. There's a lot of processing around that, I think, is going to be key. We are adding the CFU util stuff, so there's a little bit more stuff going on in the background potentially.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, too, if they're kind of future-proofing things, so maybe we see a return in the future of in-place upgrades to, maybe a different version.
And I've heard that terminology being used, the future-proofing and modernizing the hardware.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it, right?
Right.
But you do there are a few notable enhancements to what you can do with this hardware. We're going from 80,000 max users in a pool to 106,000, I think it is. But we also can have 16 front-end nodes instead of 12 front-end nodes. And I don't know the numbers on it, but there's an increase in the amount of concurrent calls a mediation role can handle as well.
Yeah. So really focusing server on big enterprise. Like these are things that are not going to help SME, but at the high end, that's a material different in your investment, in your number of pools, in your number of servers, definitely.
Apparently, according to Microsoft, SMBs will run in the cloud.
Well,
Makes sense, though.
Yeah. I mean,
so why would you manage such an infrastructure if you're an SMB?
And Microsoft, it's clear with the hardware spec increase, with the SQL server changes, so mirroring is gone because SQL are dropping mirroring.
Right.
It's definitely more focused on you've got a big environment, you've got real enterprise requirements, server is for you. Same with Exchange, I think. Like, I can't think of many reasons these days to not have Exchange in the cloud, but we all talk about that like that with each other's workloads. But then, if you need Exchange on premises, then that server spec should be okay for you as an enterprise.
There were a few changes in the roles as well from what they announced last year when they first started talking about vNext. And then this year, they changed some things. For instance, my voice is really gone, isn't it?
It sounded quite manly.
It's been a rough week.
Jazz
I think you should stick with it.
We'll go with it. All right. But the director role was supposed to be gone. That came back. Persistent chat is staying gone, obviously, for good reasons.
But still interoperable, so you can run a 2015p chat and have 2019 users go with it. So it's not gone, it's just not getting further investment.
Right.
Really.
They clearly want you to be thinking about persistent chat features in the future as Microsoft Teams.
For sure.
But SBA functionality is still there for 2015.
Yeah.
Won't be, as far as we know, a 2019 version of that anytime soon. But so there were a little bit of shifts in what the story was last year versus what we're seeing this year, and what's going to be
standard edition server. Originally, they were going to get rid of that, and there was a lot of outcry from the community. So.
And my takeaway would be Microsoft are listening, and customers have a voice. So there's the classic stuff of the user voice where you can put your input. There's tech communities, but also your account managers, your TSPs. Like get your requirements in, and when Microsoft are floating a lot of these things, often they're like, here's our direction, customer feedback, please. So don't feel like everything is set in stone. You do have opportunities to influence for sure.
Right. And they have been getting better and better at that and pushing that message out there. They want to hear the feedback. And a lot of times when we complain to them, they want to say
complain. We give constructive feedback.
There you go. That's what I meant to say. Right.
Well, I think what's important is we've said before that as MVPs we tend to see this stuff ahead of time. We complain ahead of time or criticize ahead of time.
Constructive, right.
But really, when Microsoft really listens is when the community speaks out and says, this really isn't going to work for us, or, you need to do something differently. We voice it early, but the community voices it often.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. No. And the user voice is a perfect example. You can go there and see what's being worked on, what's already delivered.
Yeah.
You can see how engaged they are on individual items.
Yeah, vote things up.
It's never been more out loud than it is right now.
Right.
And particularly with Teams, so that's a nice smooth transition there. So moving on to Teams, obviously Teams has been a big thing this show, and I guess my first takeaway is the sheer scale of the usage now. So I'm cheating, I've got the stats here, but it was 329,000 organizations. So that's 300 all different tenants using it, 87 of the Fortune 100, and 54 customers. I think it's even up from that now. I think it was 60-something customers with 10,000 or more active seats. And all those stats, importantly, are monthly active users. So those are not enabled users. Those are using it month in, month out.
That's a good caveat.
Yeah.
You've got Accenture with more than 100,000 people on there. So that's quite a testament to how well it's being adopted.
And some real proof points that it scales. Now obviously, that's not every customer using every workload yet. It's a lot of collab usage, it's some chat usage, it's some voice, it's a load of meetings usage for sure. But it's good to see that just generally this is not a flash in the pan. This is just ticking up. If you look at the numbers year on year on year, it's ticking up really aggressively. And I still think we're only at the beginning of the growth curve, really.
I'm sure, yeah, I believe we are. They're doing a ton right now, and I think that all the people that have kind of been waiting to jump into it, at least in the unified communication space, they're starting to see that it's getting close to that time for them.
Yeah.
That what they were waiting on is right about there. So
look at the all the excitement that was announced this week about Teams being the fastest growing application in Microsoft's history, right? So it's just there's a lot of initiative behind it. If you're in the Teams space, this was a conference to come to, right? More than 50 different sessions about Teams. Some of those were how to get off a Skype for Business server and into Teams, but a lot of different topics covered. If you couldn't find information about what you're into in Teams at this conference, I think you did Ignite wrong.
and of course for people watching remote, all those sessions are recorded, the decks are up on Tech Communities, so if you weren't here, that stuff is all available on demand, and if you were here, we were just talking off camera, realistically Ignite is a lot about networking these days. You can't get to 50 sessions. Well, if anybody did, I'm impressed, but I got to a handful. I'm going to go watch those over the next few weeks at home.
Yeah, I haven't been able to be in a lot of sessions, so there's a lot to catch up for me to do as well.
Yeah.
But that was a great point. This is about networking and social. They have pushed those themes so largely this year at the conference. And sessions are important, but you have a lot of people taking advantage of live streaming, even at the conference.
Yeah.
So it's available to you to go back and watch later. Please do. Don't think that you missed out at all.
Yeah.
So.
But what I also say is I think it's a bigger focus on community this year.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the community hub, we have all these recording stages.
Yeah.
And I really feel the change there as well in terms of comparing it to the previous years.
Yeah, I'd say my two favorite things actually were we did the Microsoft Teams community meet and greet over in the community area, loads of attendees around, loads of questions, and then we did an MVP. Stoller, you and Brian Ricks organised an MVP meet and greet, which is just an ask us anything type scenario. That's the most fun for me because you get to talk to customers using this stuff for real.
Yeah, and also see on the Microsoft booths there are product managers there, and you can get people and ask them questions or ask when people will be on, so you can ask them questions. So bring your questions really.
Definitely.
With the community, I mean. How often have you gone to a conference where they've had podcast studios that you could use to do your own podcast? Yeah. I think that's great, and these things have been booked solid all week.
Yeah.
The three of them here in front of us and the big fishbowl one behind it. I think Microsoft's really interested in helping people get information out, not just getting the information out themselves.
Definitely.
And I think that really helps with driving adoption to some of the solutions that we've seen here this week.
Cool. So talking of Teams being such a big topic, Stoller, we were talking about how it's not really Teams as a product, it's the Microsoft 365 collaboration stack. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, they were very vocal about that, especially in keynotes, that this is not just Office 365 or Teams or specific products, but it's the whole suite of Microsoft 365. Yeah. And what we see in the market is the same thing as you need more than just Teams. You need identity, you need updated clients in order to use all the new features.
Yeah.
You need to at least secure identity, two-factor authentication. There's been a lot of sessions on that here as well, with MFA and doing it right, with conditional access. You get some new features there. And also with Windows 10 to stay up to date, to get, for instance, the OneDrive files on demand, which is really important for Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive.
Yeah, DLP stood out for me. Like that's cross-product.
Yeah,
the Microsoft Search stuff, cross-product. All the audit stuff, cross-product.
Yeah. So what we see is that Microsoft 365 is not just a branding or marketing thing. It's actually a product.
Yeah.
We will see more and more features actually go and be only available if you have the whole suite.
Yeah.
And I talk to customers as well, and they are starting to catch on that. This is more than just buying just a workload. It's more about the ecosystem around your productivity.
Yeah, I don't think you can get true value out of Teams if you treat it as a point solution. Like, yes, conceptually you could just do your meetings on it and actually, get some value. You replace, say, a competitor product and you solve your meetings. But where it really starts to impact like organizational business productivity and change is where you stack these things together. You've got your Microsoft Stream, your Microsoft Flow, your Search, your audit trail. All that stuff comes together, and the mobile experience is just top notch. So that stuff coming together is where the value is for me.
Well, I think that, like Ståle said, DLP, all your compliance, all that stuff, I think helps specific sectors that have those requirements, that those requirements are much more important, really come in and adopt Teams, the financial sector, the government sector, things like that. So I think that Microsoft's really stepping up and closing those gaps that's stopping some organizations from being able to at least move somewhat into Teams and those related technologies.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, and a super interesting kind of change in Microsoft generally is they're getting much more vertically focused. So the old story was, Microsoft do the 80%, and then you as a customer or as a partner, you tweak that for the particular vertical. Now it feels like both from Satya Nadella's keynote and from the Teams keynote, Microsoft are building a product, but then they're saying, actually, how can we tweak this to really deliver in education? How can we tweak this to really deliver in health? Health was one of the big ones. I think it was something like 18% of the employment or GDP of the US, and it's similar worldwide. So if Microsoft can impact that, they can have a material impact on the whole country's productivity and wealth. So they're really thinking about it at a really high level.
Right.
Yeah, and we have been working with Skype for Business for a couple of years together. I'd never seen such passion amongst users as when they get presented Teams.
Yeah.
And we've been working with Skype for Business.
It's the Giphies.
We have changing lives with how you can do meetings. You can just roll out of bed and just be in a meeting. Make sure you at least have a sweater on. But Teams is like a whole different plane. They totally get it. They get the chat. They get the files. They get the meetings. So it's actually end users driving the adoption, and that's really good. And now when we get also first-line worker experience embedded into Teams, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, certainly first-line worker. I mean, Ståle, we're both from Europe, so you see it a lot there, but I'm sure you see it in the US too, is all first-line workers are obviously mobile first, and they're just trying to get their job done. So very often they land on consumer tools to do it because they're not trying to be non-compliant, they're not trying to not respect GDPR, but they need to get something done in a hurry. So we see a lot of that, and I think the mobile experience is so strong on Teams. For the first time, you can genuinely go to those workers and say, I have a compliant alternative that is not going to ruin your experience. You can add your photos, you can send your location, you can annotate stuff, just like the consumer platforms can do.
Right, and that brings up a good point, because not only can you do it from the mobile application, but you can do it from a web browser too. So you can walk up to a kiosk machine or whatever and have access to all the stuff that you get when you have the full client installed. So it's all that portability, and not only that, but a fundamental shift that we've seen is that there's feature parity across those clients, right?
So things get released at the same
time.
What
a concept, right?
Crazy.
I mean, how often have we gone before where certain clients lagged way behind other clients in adoption of certain features, and of course that was always a pain point. So
it's super hard to explain to customers, like, well, the Mac users get this, and the mobile users, and Android does this. It's much more streamlined now, for sure.
And because Microsoft controls the update cycle, everybody's always got the same features everywhere. You don't have a part of an organization that has some things, and you have to wait for those clients to update.
No, like background blur. So if you were talking about Skype for Business server release, Ignite, they'd be like, this new feature is here, and 3 years later, you'd still have customers that haven't done the CU yet or haven't gone to that version yet. Microsoft can now announce things and be like, it's on Ring 4, it's generally available, everybody has access to this. That's a big change.
Just go on the computer and try it. It will probably be there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that in itself is a big change for IT, isn't it? Because IT are very used to being, we control the process, we check things, we test things. It's getting a bit more fluid now. Yes, there are rings. Yes, you can accelerate and decelerate things to a certain extent. But broadly, it's about communicating the change and managing it in your business and less about controlling the change.
That's a great point on the IT pro side of things, though. But while there's parts of that are being streamlined, there's also a need to have greater control of the organization to be able to manage the tenant at a higher level.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of news and features put out in that particular area. Teams templates. There was a number of things that like Ann Michaels presented during the general session.
Yeah.
Giving IT admins more control over when a team expires, how to manage your teams in the admin center, things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, we see that you will not be like a Teams administrator administrating everything. Because if you're going to do that, you're going to administer identity, you're going to administer Teams, both for messaging and voice and meetings. And then you're going to go and administer compliance, stuff like that. And we're seeing more that you have you will be in charge of telephony and messaging. You will be in charge of identity. This needs to work for this to work. And then you bring in compliance. They have their own pain. So I see more, and this is going to be a challenge for organizations, right? Because everyone needs to be talking to each other.
What a crazy concept, right? Different teams talking to each other.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
But those new admin roles, though, that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's huge.
Because there were so many customers that are like, you're telling me I need to give you global admin access to be able to and it's like that is a problem for a lot of organizations. So being able to delegate and have an RBAC-like way of delegating permissions was a big announcement.
Well, we also have we will have the ability now to administer teams that we're not a member of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yay.
That's been a huge pain point for us. We've been doing some stuff at Modality where we're injecting a reporting account into every single team so we can report. It got us by, but it's being able to have that proper admin level view of the world is so key. Especially
when users can create their own teams. If you're not aware of that team, you're not a member of that team, you have no visibility as it is right now. That can be problematic. I mean, from not just an administration perspective, but what about, the information that's in some of those teams that you really can't see. You can't police that information. So I think it's great. It's very welcome. I think it took way too long for this to come. That we'll be able to administer these teams, but
it's funny that kind of where we all come from as a technical background. It's like there are some things that we see as just fundamental. We're like, well, RBAC, it's best practice. Microsoft are kind of balancing that, but some of that stuff is traditional view of the world and some of it is new, and the user feedback is coming through, isn't it? Because that's one that was heavy user feedback. It's a must.
So what we see though is that there are two types of administration of teams. You have the GUI based, so they want to put as much as possible in the GUI, where you have creating of policies, enabling users, enabling teams lifecycle. But then you also have the developer approach with PowerShell and Graph, so you can do your own stuff as well.
Yeah. Right. And you dig into this back, you're a PowerShell guy a bit, but it feels like to some extent the GUI and Graph are winning over PowerShell in terms of mindshare. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, people that have long worked with PowerShell have this little bit of a shift to start using Graph API. It's kind of a different concept. But it scales better. It's far more reaching into the Office 365 stack, so it's far more flexible.
Yeah.
And you can still use PowerShell to access Graph. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
Right. So so all of your tools, your community developed tools, can be adapted for stuff like that. So I think it's a step in the right direction. I would really like to see a little bit more in PowerShell and not just have Microsoft saying, well, that's in Graph API.
Yeah.
But I think we still do have the ability of doing all these things, building things out, administering things, reporting on things, monitoring things, all with tools outside of the admin control panel.
Yeah, but remember that the PowerShell module for Teams has been in beta. Yeah. So, and it's going to be released in 1.0 this fall. So now we actually actually get a PowerShell module for Teams.
A real,
a
real one.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, the PowerShell module is just a wraparound graph, so it's making it a little more accessible to a traditional PowerShell person, but it's nothing you couldn't do in graph already.
Right.
I do kind of agree with you, Pat. I think like there's a definite stepping stone between PowerShell and graph, and it's nice when Microsoft put a bit of work in to save administrators having to go straight from, we've only just got the bulk of administrators from GUI to PowerShell, so jumping to APIs, it's not actually that much of a shift in terms of technology, but in terms of mind state and owning the code is quite a big difference.
Well, the ability to have access to APIs means that a lot of these software development companies, including the one I work for, can now build all kinds of nice tools without having to do complex scripting. They just can make API calls to these things. And I think that's a step in the right direction, too. It's all about embracing the community and what they can do, giving them the tools to get the job done.
Yeah. And the nice thing with investing in understanding graph is you're going cross-stack. So you're not learning just the Teams PowerShell module. You're learning how to potentially do control admin things in SharePoint and OneDrive and pulling data from other products as well.
So what you're saying that is if you want to be ahead of things, learn how to program
how to use
graph.
Using
PowerShell,
like 1,000%.
Well.
If you're the guy or the girl in the org that got to PowerShell first and became that go-to, this person, Michelle's the woman's go-to to script all my problems away, that's the person now that I think should be looking seriously at graph, because that's the next gen of, I can pull this together and tweak that setting and tweak this setting for sure.
Yeah, I read a quote the other day that said, a Windows admin that doesn't use PowerShell is like a farmer that doesn't have a tractor. Right, you've got to embrace these tools. They're there to make your life easier. There's a little bit of a learning curve and stuff, but I think if you're not embracing PowerShell and Graph API in a Microsoft-centric job, I think your days are numbered.
And it's fun though. The moment you solve a problem with PowerShell and Graph, you feel good.
Yeah.
You get feel it in here. Yeah, it's fun, and then you want to do more.
It's all warm and fuzzy.
So what else? I guess
dynamic group membership.
Oh yeah, another big admin tool.
That's a big one.
Yeah. There have been a lot of concerns about how, users that come and go from a company are going to be managed in a team, and by being able to create a team on a dynamic group, then that really helps solve a lot of the administration problems there.
Or move in and out of groups.
Right.
Yeah.
But yes, between group, that's absolutely. So that was another really big thing to have. There was just so much news around making the administration for IT pros something they actually have control over, something that's easier to do. Taking that administration out of having to do it all in Teams and actually putting it in tools behind the scenes, Admin Center and PowerShell, Graph API. So that's the stuff I was really excited to see.
But remember though, the roles they showed, they are administered through Azure.
Yes.
So that's where you want to work with your users, with your groups, with your RBAC. And I think a lot of Office 365 administrators, they're like, is it Azure here as well? Should I use that? So actually that's the default moving forward. To use Azure to manage your Azure Active Directory, to manage your users and access rights.
Yep.
And that makes sense if you think about it. And we're talking about groups and object identities, and Azure AD is where they belong.
So another thing I called out for kind of seeing Teams take another big step of maturity was the device certification program and more vendors getting into devices.
Yes.
Were there any devices or device scenarios that stood out for any of you?
Crestron is making phones.
Yeah.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know.
I did not.
They are?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes.
That was a big surprise. You usually start hearing about this a little early, and I see the announcement come through the blog, and I'm like, Crestron has a Teams phone now. Yeah. 2 of them, actually. So that was one that I wasn't aware of.
I did booth duty at the Microsoft booth around Skype room systems, so it was nice to see the Teams meeting room client running on 6 different platforms and how the experience was identical across all those platforms. You basically just looked at what form factor you wanted to use and a couple of hardware features. But it was real nice. I think that getting those devices in and certified provides a good spot for organizations to look to see, is this going to work? How does this affect my what I have now? The Skype room systems can all connect to Skype for Business server. too. So you get them now, and when you move to Teams, you can flip them over to work with accessing Office 365. So I think that was good thinking there, and it really helps increase your return on your investment.
The having the same interface though is big. You look at different models previously with Skype for Business, and every vendor has kind of a different look and feel, and buttons are in different places, and the menus are a little different. And with the Microsoft Teams interface on the phones, you pick the vendor who you're most comfortable with, but at the end of the day, that interface is pretty much the same. It's the Microsoft Teams experience that you know already, and you know what to do in it. You know how to get to your calls and your meetings and your contacts and your voicemail. It's all right there.
You can also mix and match vendors. Someone might have a huddle solution that's good for you, but as you step up to a bigger room, you need a different solution.
And actually, the room systems, that's a big deal. Being able to mix and match all the components of a room system. So.
But the buttons being the same is the key.
Yeah, and the big questions that I was getting in the booth was, is this cost me as much as a Cisco solution? No, it's not anywhere near that. It's so much less expensive. It's so much cheaper to build out a quality experience for users in a meeting room now than it has been in the past. But you were mentioning Crestron having phones. I stopped by the Yealink booth, and Yealink's got some sexy looking phones with some great big screens on them.
He's really excited about it.
I love their devices, and I think they're really gathering a lot of steam in the endpoint space. But you're right. You're able to go and kind of have that same experience across all these different phones as far as what's on the screen.
It's interesting though that you mentioned Yealink, because talking to Ilya Buchstein yesterday about this, and he's over devices for Teams, right? And he actually said, and I don't know the details on it, but there was if you look at the Crestron phone and the Yealink, they're a very similar form factor, and I guess there was a partnership there on the back end for that.
Right.
So that was an interesting thing to find out. And mentioning Yealink, they went beyond phones as well. They actually are in the Skype room system space now.
Yep, they had three different devices for room systems in their booth, and they got a lot of excitement in the Microsoft booth because they have a nice small form factor that.
I actually like that one, the small one.
It is. It's cute. I like it.
Yeah,
cute. And let's face it, some people are all about how it looks, right?
Yeah.
If the functionality, if it's running the same client, then the operation of that device is exactly the same as all the other ones. So having a nice form, it comes down to the form factor. Do you want something big that's running on Surface hardware? Do you want something small that's, doesn't take up a lot of space? The Yealink got a lot of attention for there.
But there's one thing I want to say though, and this is important, you need to pay attention, is that the reason why they do the certification process is because they need it. It's a program where you have the correct drivers, support for the wideband codecs, noise cancellation both on the ears and the microphones, tested and optimized for voice over IP. So that the buttons work, so you're muted on your device, it's muted in the call, and it's actually a hard no to not use.
Well, it brings
Teams certified device or Skype for Business certified device.
But this was always the weird gap, right? So we've come from the Skype world, like that was always like the real rule. Use certified devices. We do reporting. One of the first reports we put up is like, end user compute team, all these people are using Realtek, PC mic and speakers. You need to fix this. In Teams, we didn't really have a certified option. It was like the Skype headsets are kind of good. Now we have an official certification, as you say. The buttons will come into play, the drivers will all
So
be
it's not okay to use Bose headsets or earphone earbuds or iPhone earbuds or stuff like that. That's not okay.
Yeah, PC mic and speakers is the first thing to get out though. I'd rather have somebody using Bose than PC mic and speakers, but then certified after that. If you want it to really work, that's what you do.
Yeah. And there were a couple other device things that were pretty big news. We all saw back at Enterprise Connect the first time the mobile phone station was on stage.
Oh yeah, the Plantronics Polycom.
And so Plantronics Polycom Elara 60 series is going to be out in Q1 of 2019, but you could go to the booth and touch it and play with it and all that now.
I think
you get buttons.
Yeah,
and that plays super well in that first-time worker scenario we talked about as well.
Yes,
like I'm a retail shop floor manager. I spend 90% of my time running around the floor doing my job. 10% of my time I sit at my desk and do a bit of admin, talk to central office. isn't it nice to just drop my experience on the desk and carry on, as opposed to like, you know, maybe I don't even need to log into a full system. I just want to sit, do some phone calls on my headset, and then take off again, and I don't have to, you know, log into a phone, log out of a phone, use a different number. All that stuff follows.
And also, if you use video at the same time, which is a great experience on mobile and is getting better, you can actually flip it up to adjust the camera.
They really wanted you to know about the tilting.
But it's fun though. We love stuff like that.
We've all had the same briefing, right?
Ilya made a point to be like, look at this.
Yeah, look at this.
Those will work great in corporate environments where people are hoteling too.
Yeah,
we see that at loads, particularly in major cities where desk space is tight, like hot desking or hoteling is super popular.
I think the last device I'd call out, I mean, there was so much in the room system space, but something that I haven't seen in a while is I don't even remember what it was called, the Yealink video system, where it's a screen, it's a monitor sitting in front of you, and then you've got the camera mounted up top.
Yeah, like a personal video unit.
Yeah, and it's all touch screen for the calling and all that, and I was like, that's
was the monitor
different.
optional though, or was it?
It was optional, so you could pair it with, and you didn't have to use necessarily a touch screen, but
this was.
It went on top of any monitor.
Cool.
And turned it into a room system or a video system.
It's fun. We love devices. So.
I know they're fun to play with.
And you know, the expo's over on the last day now, but the common theme on all those device manufacturers is go and talk to them. They're willing to do, you know, proof of concepts. They're willing to give you trial kit. It's really hard to judge devices from a website, and like Pat says, visuals are a big deal, but also there are, you know, differences in audio quality between some of these devices, differences in video quality. You want to ideally get a unit or two in, test it local, test it remote, really understand what you're getting into with these devices. The software is going to be uniform, but the experience, the mics, the speakers, headsets, as Starley said, can all be quite different when you're hands-on.
And they're all headsets have always been a very personal thing too. So.
Oh, for sure, There's not one size
and most of them have trading programs for those link phone editions.
Oh, yep, good point. Yeah.
So which is going to die.
But not really devices, but VIS, video interop service for Teams, was just released as well from the Polycom side and Plantronic side. So if you need video interop and you were using that with Skype for Business Online, you can now extend that to the Teams environment. Yeah,
that's a really big deal for anybody with standards-based rooms. Like, again, that room-based investment doesn't disappear overnight. You may be on a transition to Teams-first rooms. Maybe you're not. Maybe your video rooms are standard. Either way, Polycom, the cloud real presence, like that will give you today the interop, and I think Plantronics and Blue Jeans are not far behind on that.
Pexip and Blue Jeans, before the end of October, I think.
Yep.
And it shows that you have different approaches to bring video systems into Teams. I think, and their takeaway is that Microsoft has a bigger emphasis on video for Teams. The way you do video real estate, and you have good video features across devices. So
there's lots of choice, and that was something that was pointed out to me this time last year. They had one room system that was ready to go that you could purchase now. And that was it. One room system. There was more coming out. We're now at six different vendors across room systems. So there's a lot of choice to for whatever matches your organization best.
Did anyone catch anything around the new Surface Hub? I saw there were a couple in sessions, like sneakily.
Yeah, I saw. I took a picture of it in the keynote. I was on the first row.
It's pretty.
Someone told me it was a cardboard. I don't know, but it looks good, and but it takes its time to come. Released.
It's going to be later next year, right? For some of the features, I think, right?
And just for the hardware, and then you will have like a new release in 2020 where you actually get that rotating thing and the fun stuff.
That's coming later on.
That's coming later on.
Interesting.
You can actually buy a kit to upgrade if you buy next year to the one the year after. So
I'm hoping those are going to hit a slightly more
hardware CU.
I hope those are going to hit a slightly more aggressive price point, because they're easier to manufacture screens. You tile them together.
They're versatile.
I would like one at home. So
if Microsoft want to send us any, that'd be great.
Demos.
I think the UK was one of the biggest places globally for sales of those units. They've just taken places by storm. But it was the pull-through of the hardware that was the thing that was taking time. So if they can churn those out a bit faster, I think that'll be a real big hit.
Yeah, and then maybe that's part of what's taking a while, is maybe working some of that stuff out on the back end. But it's neat to look at. It was good to see it here, so it'll be coming.
Did anybody follow any of the developer announcements around Teams, the new APIs?
I
know we're pushing the limits of our combined skills.
I'm not in that space myself, but I did have a chance to briefly chat with Andrew Bybee on some of the stuff that was there.
Cool.
And that was a good conversation. There was a lot of news, actually, this time around. I cannot dive into it, talk very well about it, but stuff that a lot of third-party vendors, partners were excited to see was the introduction of the calling APIs.
Yeah, it's a huge deal.
So, yeah, that was a huge thing. And then there was other advancements in apps and stuff that I can't speak to. But
yeah,
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Guys, the calling APIs is what enables the various contact center scenarios. So we saw a lot of contact centers on the floor demoing true Teams interop now, and the APIs are in preview, so it's not GA APIs yet, but coming soon you can see how we're starting to bring both traditional telephony scenarios, but also, to Josh's point, business process stuff.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we both know somebody who's working on contact center solutions around Teams, and so I know that they're very happy that some of the API stuff is coming out.
Very happy.
Yeah, and I think it just speaks to Microsoft that they're really trying to make it available to some of these software companies, like the one I work for, and the ability to build solutions to fill that smaller gap than what we've seen in the past. Like we were talking about the 80-20 gap. The gap's a little bit smaller now, and but we'll be able to fill those gaps with some really good tools.
I think it's super interesting that how much effort they're putting into making the developer story simple for customers as well.
Yes.
So the bots creation, like it's I mean, totally not a developer. I work with developers, but I can look at the documentation and begin to piece together how things are working, and there are code examples and stuff. So the very basic stuff is super accessible these days.
And that business process stuff with the bots and the new cards that are kind of coming out that you can do a lot between different apps, not just Teams. There's a lot of good training on that stuff as well. A lot of good walkthroughs.
Yep.
We've got people like Tom Morgan who do great videos and stuff on that.
Yeah, yeah. It's another one of those things, a bit like the graph conversation earlier. If you're an IT pro, then being able to get into things like bots, things like flow, you can become the person that solves real business value issues. Like businesses struggle to understand what IT pro and administrators do to keep the lights on and keep everything working, but you solve their nagging pain about they need to get this information from here to here, or this business process needs a mobile app. Like you're on a whole new plane of them understanding what you do, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and we see more and more that I think it's important for companies to actually have that internal champion, those that can convert business needs to actually usage within the organization. I don't think it's us. It should be someone inside the organization actually understanding their business model and what's important for them. And Microsoft have several programs for those kind of people, both from the end user point of view and also from the developer point of view. So we have the Microsoft 365 Champions program, which is where they actually want to help all those driving adoption and driving business value to learn even more about the product and the possibilities and opportunities.
Yeah, I know you guys at CloudWay do some kind of a train those people type scenario, so you're picking the people out in the org and helping them get up to speed as well, which seems to be an increasing thing.
Yeah, it's important.
That was actually a big theme in the immersion zone here at Microsoft Ignite, was hands-on learning. There's a lot of great opportunities for that back there. Whether it was apps or Office or Azure, there was an enormous amount of opportunities to get your hands on the things that you wanted to learn and start digging into it. Find out if you want to chase that down further. And they were all about community, networking, learning. It was just a great opportunity for that.
Yeah, and it was a big theme. It's like, give us feedback. We want to hear from you. You have so many channels to do it.
Yes.
And so it's a big change for us that has been in the game.
A welcome
for
change.
A time.
Yeah, it's a cool thing to see the way the conference has evolved a little bit over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So,
cool. Yeah. So as we close out our time, I'd like to ask each of you kind of either your biggest takeaway and also what you're looking forward to in terms of our space. So, Pat?
I think Microsoft continues their drive to give people the tools that they need to do their job and the information to really utilize those tools to their fullest extent. Teams, I've said this before, is like a big box of Legos. It's what you build out of it, right?
Yep.
And you were able to come to this show and find out all these different things that you can do with Teams, things that people have never thought of before, things that you can typically do sometimes without incurring any extra costs. You build a bot internally, or like you said, you're getting information from point A to point B.
Yeah.
I think Microsoft did a great job of bringing that information here and showing what the future holds.
Good stuff. Sorry?
So my biggest takeaway is that I'm super excited to see what's going to happen around intelligent meetings and intelligent communication. I think this is just like the start. And we're already seeing possibilities that's only available in Teams, like background blur. You have live events, and then cloud recording. All these were still in preview, but announced here at Ignite. And this is just a start. It's possibilities that will only be enabled by having the combined Office 365 and Microsoft 365 capabilities.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited to see how that will pan. Just what you will do before the meetings, during, and especially after the meetings, how you share content, how you collaborate, and also the devices that will come in the future.
Yeah.
It'll be great to see where we are, next year in November when Ignite is back here in Orlando.
Yeah.
How much that's progressed from where we are right now.
I think it would be a big, different topic, really, different context.
Yeah. I mean, just look how far we've come in the last year, where we were a year ago when
I think
Teams was very new.
I think we are at a point of singularity. We can't grasp where we're going, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Josh?
I love the box of Legos analogy, and I feel like for a while, for a lot of organizations, they've had that box of Legos, and they're looking at the instructions, and they feel like they're missing some pieces to the instructions, right? And so they're struggling with really getting it completed and used in their organization. And with some of the announcements and things that are put out there, I think a lot of those pieces are now been put back into the box, so they can complete what they wanted to build in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think that it allows the opportunity for organizations that had barriers is. Those barriers are shrinking. There's a few more things that are still on the horizon. There's stuff that's being worked on through the end of Q4. There's some advanced enterprise calling grade features that are coming later in Q4.
Yeah.
The story continues to evolve, but for sure, some of the really big blockers, at least when you compare Skype for Business Online to Teams, they're almost gone at this stage.
Yeah.
So.
I think for me, it was just echoing that whole Microsoft 365 story. Like, if you're planning on understanding Microsoft Teams, don't think you can properly understand it or gain the business value in a vacuum. Like, you've got to understand identity. You've got to understand a little bit of SharePoint. And this is the new world of IT for me. Is you're a stack person. You're thinking about more of a generalist role than the business value role. So. Watch back some of the sessions this week, think about vertical solutions, think about how you can enable your business. Don't just think about the hardcore techie stuff, that's cool, but the business value is really where you want to be. So really great thanks to Ståle, Josh, Pat.
Thanks for having us.
No worries. Maybe we do the same thing next year, do
that would be
a
pretty
closing,
cool.
see if we can get the stage again.
Do a recap.
No. Yeah.
You can find everybody online. We won't do our plugs, but people watching, where to find us. Guys in the audience, really appreciate you coming out. We'll hang around a little bit afterwards if you guys have any questions. But to everybody watching, see you next year. Thank you.
Thank you.